da 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 da. La da 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 da. Dee 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 dee. Ba ba ba. Okay, so we are in theory going live. I think we're live now, but when I'm refreshing the page... Okay, Kiefer, I'm just said howdy. Okay, YouTube finally seems to have recognized that we're live. Gonna pop out the chat from YouTube and make sure we got all our settings set up right. We're gonna disable those live reactions, set slow mode to only 3 seconds. Welcome, Keyboard Mr. Junior Doctor. Okay. And we're going to make sure that this is set to be added to the Frankenstein weekly playlist when it's finished. Okay. And we're going to set this to game Minecraft. We're doing all the stuff that normally gets done during the music part. Without the music part. Do. Welcome, Mariuna. Glad you could join us. Welcome, Amanda Cooksey and Freya. Okay, let's see. We are going to be reading Frankenstein tonight. I think we finished last week. I think we finished chapter 9. It was before I went away on my trip. We did it kind of earlier in the week than usual. Okay, so things are a little bit... Neo says it's the one stream that could pull us away from your Deep Space Nine rewatch. Ah, glad to help. Howdy, Miss Gold Fox. Welcome, Maria Salas. Boy, this helmet has really taken a beating. At some point, we're going to need to buy mending books. I think I spent, like... I've got 21 diamonds left. Oh, these aren't even the right boots. Maybe I lost my good boots when I died. Yep. Okay. Well, that's reassuring. Oh, wait. No, they just ended up in the wrong... okay. Just ended up in the wrong box after. That's fine. Welcome back, Scar. Okay. So... yeah, we are not quite ready to go do a run on the end yet. So we're going to put these away for right now. Before we go to the end, though, we do need to stop at Cleo's and probably buy some mending books. Okay. I just really... like, I feel like this helmet is just broken enough that we should really go get the mending books now. Welcome, Small Alien. Welcome, Mitch was here. Welcome, Race Star. Centauratron says, is the Juppet no more? Well, so for episode 75, we're splitting the recording into 3 kind of modes. We're going to have the Juppet doing one part, Beetlejuice doing another, and what some people might call Human Joe doing the third. So I'm going to be switching between the 3 skins. When I'm recording, I'll want to make sure I have the correct skin on for the segment I'm doing. But when I'm not recording, it doesn't really matter. Good evening, Sandra Lynn. Thank you for joining us. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so if that's Cub's portal there, presumably, then we want Cleo's, which would be the neighborhood portal. Did they just get rid of the neighborhood portal, maybe? Did B-dubs not rebuild it? I don't recognize any of this stuff. Okay, so this is the world spawn one. Boy. Takes a second for everything to load in. Okay, so we're going this way. Bum, 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 bum. Okay. Oh, that's new. Okay. So, yeah. Cleo said I could use these villagers. So we're going to grab some books real quick. So first we're going to find a guy who trades us bookshelves. And then we're going to get some of those. Okay. Then we need to find the mending guy, which I think might be this one. Mending was respiration, depth strider, mending. Here we go. So we need mending for at least... No, I hate that when it switches over to looting. All the extra looting books end up going in here, usually. Okay. So now we have 3 mending books. Maybe we just go for it with the... I mean, how much stuff do we have to actually repair at this point? That is one thing. That's another. Leaf eater. Okay, that one. Yeah. So that means we need 2 black boxes and 2 green boxes to put back in. We're all good, and then we fill that in like so. Welcome, Linksy Raiders. My name is Joe Hills. I'm down here in slot 9 putting the hot in the hopper. We are just doing some pre-stream setup stuff. Let me show y'all one of the things that we're doing. One of the things we're doing these days is we're playing around with the Voxy mod, which lets us render very long distance kind of stuff around the server here. So, like, the shopping district is down there, but we can also see, like, there's Joel's base, and then behind it, there's my area. So, yeah, we are experiencing HermitCraft at a little bit of a different... not scale, but maybe a different level of detail than usual. So, I was actually just about to go into... Oh, I do need to go into this portal here and figure out... Whoa. Yeah, sometimes when we're near Joel's base, things get a little bad on the rendering. So we're gonna, like, not stay here. Okay. So, this one is the neighborhood one. So we need to remember that for later. That's the neighborhood portal. And that means the downhill coaster to the end is there. But yeah, what's up, Linksy Raiders? What were you guys up to? Glad to see y'all. I see you over there, Sus, who says, yo, bro, we're raiding over here. I'm aware. That's why I was saying, what's up, Linksy Raiders? In acknowledgement of that raid. It's not like, yeah, I'm looking at, I've got my volume meter says I'm definitely broadcasting and transmitting words. But okay. So before we anger all of the raiders, let's make sure hostile sounds are off. Welcome, Mellow Moogle. Lucas says, finally on time for a Joe stream. Yep. So, every Saturday night, for those of y'all who don't know what we're up to, every Saturday night, we take a break from doing kind of some more intentional, focused Minecrafting. You know, Like, for example, redstone would be very focused Minecrafting. To do a little bit more grindy stuff. So, like, you know, clearing out terraforming bits and stuff like that. So Saturday is our kind of grind kind of evening. And usually what we do is we read a book out loud. You don't have to read out loud. You're allowed to read out loud along with me. I have pinned the link to what we are reading, which is Chapter 10 of Frankenstein. We have already finished Moby Dick and Dracula, which is how pretentious people say Dracula. The D on the grave stands for Dracula. It's Dracula's grave. Anyway, we're not pretentious here. We do need to get mending on these new pieces of gear, though, because otherwise it will never repair, and then we'll slowly decay. So, we are reading Dracula. No, we read Dracula. We read Moby Dick. We are reading Frankenstein. We are on Chapter 10. If you click the What We're Reading link, it's hosted by Project Gutenberg. I only do public domain books, so that way people can read along, and I don't have to worry about getting sued. It's easier that way, believe me. You can listen to this while you lay your head down and dream. Lay Your Head Down and Dream is actually the name of our theme song, and the refrain of our theme song. But we're not doing the theme song right now. We're reading Dracula. Just as a reminder, I'm down here in slot 9 putting the hot in the hot bar. The camera gets bigger when we hit certain tipping milestones. Tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. And just as a reminder, I don't necessarily always take a break in the middle of a paragraph or whatever to thank people for tips. We acknowledge those at logical breaks in the reading. So sometimes the end of the chapter, sometimes just a natural pause. But I'm not going to cut into it immediately. So, how do you uwooify Frankenstein? Well, the subtitle is The Modern Prometheus, so it could be The Modern Prometheus. Prometheus. So here we go. Thank you, Linksy, again for the raid. And now, buckle in for a weird one. Chapter 10 of Frankenstein, The Modern Prometheus, by Mary Shelley. I spent the following day roaming through the valley. I stood beside the sources of the Arveiron, which take their rise in a glacier that with slow pace is advancing down from the summit of the hills to barricade the valley. The abrupt sides of vast mountains were before me. The icy wall of the glacier o'erhung me. A few shattered pines were scattered around, and the solemn silence of this glorious presence chamber of imperial nature was broken only by the brawling waves or the fall of some vast fragment, the thunder sound of the avalanche, or the cracking, reverberating among the mountains, of the accumulated ice, which, through the silent working of immutable laws, was ever and anon rent and torn, as if it had been but a plaything in their hands. These sublime and magnificent scenes afforded me the greatest consolation that I was capable of receiving. They elevated me from all littleness of feeling, and although they did not remove my grief, they subdued and tranquilized it. In some degree, also, they diverted my mind from the thoughts o'er which it had brooded for the last month. I retired to rest at night. My slumbers, as it were, waited on and ministered to by the assemblance of grand shapes which I had contemplated during the day. They congregated round me, the unstained snowy mountain gap, the glittering pinnacle, the pine woods, and ragged bare ravine, the eagle soaring amidst the clouds. They all gathered round me and bade me peace. Where had they fled the next morning when I awoke? All of soul inspiriting fled with sleep, and dark melancholy clouded every thought. The rain was pouring in torrents, and thick mists hid the summits of the mountains, so that I even saw not the faces of those misty friends. Still, I would penetrate their misty veil and seek them in their cloudy retreats. What were rain and storm to me? My mule was brought to the door, and I resolved to ascend to the summit of Montanvert. I remembered the effect that the view of the tremendous and ever-moving glacier had produced upon my mind when I first saw it. It had then filled me with a sublime ecstasy that gave wings to the soul and allowed it to soar from the obscure world to light and joy. The sight of the awful and majestic in nature had always indeed the effect of solemnizing my mind and causing me to forget the passing cares of life. I determined to go without a guide, for I was well acquainted with the path, and the presence of another would destroy the solitary grandeur of the scene. The ascent is precipitous, but the path is cut into continual and short windings, which enable you to surmount the perpendicularity of the mountain. It is a scene terrifically desolate. In 1,000 spots, the traces of the winter avalanche may be perceived, where trees lie broken and strewed on the ground, some entirely destroyed. Others bent, leaning upon the jutting rocks of the mountain or transversely upon other trees. The path, as you ascend higher, is intersected by ravines of snow, down which stones continually roll from above. One of them is particularly dangerous, as the slightest sound, such as even speaking in a loud voice, produces a concussion of air sufficient to draw destruction upon the head of the speaker. The pines are not tall or luxuriant, but they are somber, and they add an air of severity to the scene. I looked on the valley beneath. Vast mists were rising from the rivers which ran through it, and curling in thick wreaths around the opposite mountains, whose summits were hid in the uniform clouds, while rain poured from the dark sky and added to the melancholy impression I received from the objects around me. Alas, why does man boast of sensibilities superior to those apparent in the brute? It only renders them more necessary beings. If our impulses were confined to hunger, thirst, and desire, we might be nearly free. But now, We are moved by every wind that blows, and a chance word or scene that word may convey to us. We rest. A dream has power to poison sleep. We rise. Once wandering thought pollutes the day. We feel, conceive, or reason, laugh or weak, embrace fond woe, or cast our cares away. It is the same, be it joy or sorrow. The path of its departure is still free. Man's yesterday may ne'er be like his morrow. Naught may endure but mutability. It was nearly noon when I arrived at the top of the ascent. For some time I sat upon the rock that overlooks the sea of ice. A mist covered both that and the surrounded mountains. Presently, a breeze dissipated the cloud, and I descended upon the glacier. The surface is very uneven, rising like the waves of a troubled sea, descending low and interspersed by the rifts that sink deep. The field of ice is almost a league in width, but I spend nearly 2 hours in crossing it. The opposite mountain is a bare, perpendicular rock. From the side where I now stood, Montanvert was exactly opposite, at the distance of a league, and above it rose Mont Blanc in awful majesty. I remained in a recess of the rock, gazing on this wonderful and stupendous scene. The sea, or rather the vast river of ice, wound among its dependent mountains, whose aerial summits hung o'er its recesses. Their icy and glittering peaks shone in the sunlight o'er the clouds. My heart, which was before sorrowful, now swelled with something like joy. I exclaimed, "Wandering spirits, if indeed ye wander, and do not rest in your narrow beds, allow me this faint happiness, or take me as your companion, away from the joys of life." As I said this, I suddenly beheld the figure of a man, at some distance, advancing toward me with superhuman speed. He bounded over the crevices on the ice, among which I had walked with caution. His stature, also, as he approached, seemed to exceed that of a man. I was troubled. A mist came over my eyes, and I felt a faintness seize me. But I was quickly restored by the cold gale of the mountains. I perceived as the shape came nearer, sight tremendous and abhorred, that it was the wretch whom I had created. I trembled with rage and horror, resolving to wait his approach and then close with him in Mortal Kombat! He approached. His countenance bespoke bitter anguish, combined with disdain and malignity, while its unearthly ugliness rendered it almost too horrible for human eyes. But I scarcely observed this. Rage and hatred had at first deprived me of utterance, and I recovered only to overwhelm him with words expressive of furious detestation and contempt. "Devil!" I exclaimed, "do you dare approach me? And you not fear the fierce vengeance of my arm wreaked on your miserable head? Begone, vile insect! Or rather, stay that I may trample you to dust. And oh, that I could, with the extinction of your miserable existence, restore those victims whom you have so diabolically murdered.
I expected this reception,
said the demon.
All men hate the wretched. How then must I be hated, who am miserable beyond all living things? Yet you, my Creator, detest and spurn me, thy creature, to whom thou art bound by ties only dissoluble by the annihilation of one of us. You purpose to kill me. How dare you sport thus with life? Do your duty toward me, and I will do mine toward you and the rest of mankind. If you will comply with my conditions, I will leave them and you at peace. But if you refuse, I will glut the maw of death until it be satiated with the blood of your remaining friends.
Abhorred monster, fiend that thou art, the tortures of hell are too mild a vengeance for thy crimes. Wretched devil, you reproach me with your creation. Come on, then, that I may extinguish the spark which I so negligently bestowed. My rage was without bounds, and I sprang on him, impelled by all the feelings which can arm one being against the existence of another. He easily eluded me and said,
Be calm. I entreat you to hear me before you give vent to your hatred on my devoted head. Have I not suffered enough that you seek to increase my misery? Life, although it may only be an accumulation of anguish, is dear to me, and I will defend it. Remember, thou hast made me more powerful than thyself. My height is superior to thine. My joints are more supple. But I will not be tempted to set myself in opposition to thee. I am thy creature, and I will be even mild and docile to my natural lord and king. If thou wilt also perform thy part, which thou owest me. Oh, Frankenstein, be not equitable to every other, and trample upon me alone, to whom thy justice and even thy clemency and affection is most due. Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss, from which I alone am irrevocably excluded. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous.
Begone! I will not hear you. There can be no community between you and me. We are enemies. Begone, or let us try our strength in a fight in which one must fall.
How can I move thee? Will no entreaties cause thee to turn a favorable eye upon thy creature, who implores thy goodness and compassion? Believe me, Frankenstein, I was benevolent, and my soul glowed with love and humanity. But am I not alone? Miserably alone? You, my creator, abhor me. What hope can I gather from your fellow creatures who owe me nothing? They spurn and hate me. The desert mountains and dreary glaciers are my refuge. I have wandered here many days. The caves of ice, which I only do not fear, are a dwelling to me, and the only one which man does not grudge. These bleak skies hail. These bleak skies I hail, for they are kinder to me than your fellow beings. If the multitude of mankind knew of my existence, they would do as you do and arm themselves for my destruction. Shall I not then hate them who abhor me? I will keep no terms with my enemies. I am miserable, and they shall share my wretchedness. Yet it is in your power to recompense me and deliver them from an evil, which it only remains for you to make so great, that not only you and your family, but thousands of others shall be swallowed up in the whirlwinds of its rage. Let your compassion be moved, and do not disdain me. Listen to my tale. When you have heard that, abandon or commiserate me, as you shall judge that I deserve. But hear me. The guilty are allowed by human laws, bloody as they are, to speak in their own defense before they are condemned. Listen to me, Frankenstein. You accuse me of murder, and yet you would, with a satisfied conscience, destroy your own creature. Oh, praise the eternal justice of man. Yet I ask you not to spare me. Listen to me, and then, if you can, and if you will, destroy the work of your hands.
Why do you call to my remembrance, I rejoined, circumstances of which I shudder to reflect, that I have been miserable, the miserable origin and author? Cursed be the day, abhorred devil, in which you first saw the light. Cursed, although I curse myself, be the hands that formed you. You have made me wretched beyond expression. You have left me no power to consider whether I am just to you or not. Begone, relieve me from the sight of your detested form.
Thus, I relieve thee, my creator,
He said, and placed his hated hands before my eyes, which I flung from me with violence.
Thus I take from thee a sight which you abhor. Still, thou canst listen to me and grant me thy compassion. By the virtues that I once possessed, I demand this from you. Hear my tale. It is long and strange. And the temperature of this place is not fitting to your fine sensations. Come to the hut upon the mountain. The sun is yet high in the heavens. Before it descends to hide itself beyond your snowy precipices and illuminate another world, you have heard my story and can decide. On you it rests whether I quit forever the neighborhood of man and lead a harmless life, or become the scourge of your fellow creatures and the author of your own speedy ruin.
As he said this, he led the way across the ice. I followed. My heart was full, and I did not answer him, but as I proceeded, I weighed the various arguments that he had used and determined at least... My heart was full, and I did not answer him. But as I proceeded, I weighed the various arguments that he had used and determined at least to listen to his tale. I was partly urged by curiosity, and compassion confirmed my resolution. I had hitherto supposed him to be the murderer of my brother, and I eagerly sought a confirmation or denial of this opinion. For the first time also, I felt what the duties of a creator toward his creature were, and that I ought to render him happy before I complained of his wickedness. These motives urged me to comply with his demand. We crossed the ice, therefore, and ascended the opposite rock. The air was cold, and the rain again began to descend. We entered the hut, the fiend with an air of exultation, I with a heavy heart and depressed spirits. But I consented to listen, and, seating myself by the fire which my odious companion had lighted, he thus began his tale. And that concludes Chapter 10 of Frankenstein, the Modern Prometheus, by Mary Shelley. Okay, anybody have any thoughts on Chapter 10? We're hearing the creature speak for the first time. Welcome, Lizzie Mack. I see you rolled in. Have a good night, Amanda. What else is going on here? Let's copy and paste that so I can see if I need to moderate it. It looks like it's fine. Hey, we got a tip rolling in. Let's see who it's from. It's from Luna Sapphire, who says, sorry to interrupt the book. Well, you didn't, because we didn't read it until the end of the chapter. I just wanted to wish you a happy Hermit's a Day, May. Joe Hill's Day. Oh, thank you very much, Katie. That's, apparently it is Joe Hill's Day on Hermit's a Day month. I'll have to check Tumblr later. That gets us $8 toward our first face camera expansion milestone, $12 away from the next one. So thank you very much for kicking us off. Luna Sapphire. Okay. Sus said, did that old man really think he could beat Frankenstein in a fight? In fairness, he's not an old man, but he did spend like 6 months in bed. He's like 25, maybe at oldest. Probably closer to 22. He's probably actually 18 or 19. But he spent the last, like, 6 months in bed. So, yeah, he did want to take Frankenstein in a fight, because he's pretty sure Frankenstein murdered his brother, which then, like, one of the house staff members was falsely accused of, and then she was hanged. So, as far as this guy is concerned, he just, 2 people just died because of Frankenstein. Kai for M says he's about 24. Okay. Yeah, I hadn't paid much attention to how old he was when he went off to university or how long he had spent there. He was at the university for 6 years before he returned. Okay, thank you, Kai for M. But yeah. He totally has been watching Frankenstein, like, in the distance, scale cliff faces like a spider. Which is also one of those things that, like, modern portrayals of Frankenstein are always kind of lumbering or whatever. But in the original, like, he's walking through the Alps and Frankenstein is just, like, scrambling up, like, sheer cliff faces and then the undersides of overhangs and stuff. Like, this is climbing wall Frankenstein, not slow modern Frankenstein. This is the original novel, so you're getting the good stuff. Tasing says, I really like these upcoming chapters because this creature tells his own tale of the story so far. Yep, we're going to get to that in a little minute. We like to kind of give a chance for each chapter to breathe. And give folks a chance to chime in with their thoughts on the chapter we just read. So we are going to get to chapter 11 tonight, don't worry. We're only 45 minutes into the stream. We have plenty of time left. Mailman Dave says, the classic horror movie did this monster dirty. This guy is pretty thoughtful. I know, right? He's basically saying all the things that we were saying during the original chapters. Like, wait, did Frankenstein really just run off? And abandon this guy? What's going on? We all need therapy. Says, I think it's interesting how many older books I've read precipice. It's a word that I've seen or heard at least once. I mean, precipice is a really commonly used word. In the song Walk Hard, I think the song, no, not Walk Hard, from the album Walk Hard, the Beautiful Ride song starts it off with, as I stand on the precipice of death, my perspective is enormous. Also, there's multiple games in the Rain Slick Precipice of Darkness series by Jerry Holkins and Mike Krahulik, which are pretty fun. No, they're the Penny Arcade guys, not the Penny Dreadful guys. No, I know you're talking about something else, Grandma Willow. I'm not familiar with that adaptation. But yeah, last time I read Frankenstein was about 20 years ago. So I'm coming... The other two books that I've been I reread on stream, Dracula and Moby Dick, I had read 10 years earlier each. And so, like, for this, I usually try to read books I've read before, but that I'm coming back to. I didn't realize how much of a difference reading a book 10 years ago versus 20 years ago made until I'm going through this, and I'm like, oh boy. Like, with Dracula, I would get to a part and be like, oh yeah, it's this part. But, like, with this book, I'm constantly like, oh man, I had completely forgotten about this. Let's do some inventory management too, because that's easier to swap tools. Sorry, it was so stuttery. I was so stuttery with my reading when I was initially trying to get set up. I should have waited to start reading until I was just digging. Showtime did a Frankenstein series. I'll have to check that out. Once I start reading something like this on stream, I don't look at any other adaptations until I'm finished, though. For the most part, because I don't want it to affect my interpretation. Like, the reason that we're going with the unabridged original text is because I want to bring the original text to life, and not because I want to copy somebody else's adaptation. So then what I'll do... So I'll probably end up binging a bunch of Frankenstein adaptations after I finish this book. Sis said that was stuttery. I couldn't even tell. Yeah, when I was initially trying to get all the boxes and stuff out here, I kept pausing because I was, like, losing my place in the text when I was, like, shuffling through these boxes. Inventory management while reading is a lot harder than digging while reading. The digging, I felt like I was getting in my groove. Okay. Centauratron says, this is definitely making me realize how little I knew about the story of Frankenstein. Yeah, well, and that's one of the reasons that I try to pick classics like this that have a million adaptations, because everyone's familiar with it enough from seeing, like, the joke versions of it on Animaniacs and the way it's infiltrated the zeitgeist and whatnot, you know, that, like... You know, people played the Monster Bash pinball machine and seen the Frankenstein on there. They've seen the Herman Munster interpretation of the Frankenstein monster. You know, there's all sorts of... like, this story, like Dracula and Moby Dick, is in our culture, whether you're familiar with the original or not. And so everybody gets something out of going back to the original. And... So it's just, yeah. I really enjoy doing these old books this way. Welcome, Elodie. Glad to see you. Where We Are Again says, I love how Victor flees to the mountains, sublime, untouched. And yet the consequences of his actions, literally personified by the grotesque monster, keep following him around. Yeah, it's also, I guess we're going to learn here if the monster came here seeking Victor, or if the monster came here to be alone and Victor just kind of showed up. Is this a coincidence? I don't know. We're gonna have to keep reading. Elodie says, I'm sad I missed some of the Frankenstein being read. Well, the Frankenstein streams are the only ones that I do VODs of, or that I guarantee VODs of. Cristoli says, does the monster genuinely expect a relationship with Victor after murdering his brother? I'm a little confused on what he wants. Well, he wants Victor to hear him out. He wants to tell Victor his side of what happened. Was it murder? Was his brother taken over by an alien and Frankenstein had to kill the alien? Was he bit by a zombie and he had to be put down for the good of the other survivors? And only the monster had the strength and peace of mind to do it? I mean, there's a lot of ways this could have gone down. There's a lot of justifications for a giant 8-foot-tall guy to, you know, possibly strangle a child to death. And all that he wants is for Vicky F to hear him out. That's all he's asking. Cristalli3 says that's an adaptation of Frankenstein I'd read. Does he just want to play catch with his dad? It's not Field of Dreams, bud. In his defense, Your Honor, he's just a big baby. Izanik says, wait, you're a part of HermitCraft? Well, I mean, that would make sense. That would explain why the shopping district is over there with the Death Scar and Big Wood and Cub Fans Rocket. And that would explain why Joel's City is over there before, you know, behind Doc's biblically accurate flood and whatnot. Bada bum, bada bum. Dee 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 dee. La da dee dee da da da. Okay. What? No. Unacceptable. You know, I'm realizing I have not eaten for a while. Why are these guys always getting in my way? I don't understand. I done nothing to you. Did I see all the fan art being posted today? It's Joe Hill's day. I haven't really had a chance to look at Tumblr. I've had a busy day. I've got a lot of prep work to do for episode 75. I've, in theory, been preparing for this for the last year, or for the last 15 months. And all the pieces are starting to, all the tumblers are clicking into place to unlock the next phase of the season for me. And with all those tumblers flipping and clicking and whatnot, I haven't had a lot of chance to be otherwise online. I'll have to check that out when I get a chance. But yeah, other stuff I got done today. So remember how these roads used to dead end out like there? Well, this one now goes all the way around to there. And I've got a storage room in that mountain now. And I've got a beacon at the base of the water tower, and I had to tweak some things with that. I did some more terraforming down here. And I also did some work on the roof of the Welcome Center. I thought about streaming some of this, but I was just like, I've got a really good rhythm. But yeah, you can now see the roof of the Welcome Center a lot better. It looks more like a building. So we're clearing out at least part of this here between the water tower and there. So the line of sight on the water tower from the entrance looks right. Or at least closer to right. Welcome, Pashmina. Glad you could join us. Let's make sure. Facecam is so good. Yep, I'm down here in slot 9, putting the hot in the hot bar. We are $12 away from the next face camera expansion milestone. PJ is not here. If anybody wants to show PJ how the camera gets bigger, once again, we're only 12 away from that first expansion. Okay. A lot of nonsense. Okay. Slayer heads down a dream. Yeah, you know what? Let's go get, before we start the next chapter, we gotta... Yeah, let's go get a pane of glass, because apparently people are having a hard time seeing the face camera. But yeah, we are building Eero Saarinen's Bell Labs Research and Development Campus. When it was constructed, it was the largest mirrored glass building in the world. It is a 1/4 mile long. The oval around it is 900 meters on the major diameter, 600 meters on the minor diameter. Here, let's get my green screen in. So now you can see me better in front of the green screen. You can tell it chromas out my tank top, too. See? Okay. So... continuing here. Icarus Gloom says, what chapter are we on now? Well, that's actually what I need to do before we update the pinned link. I need to put what we're reading as chapter 11. Let's pin that. Replace pinned message on YouTube. Pin this message on Twitch, but now I've got to... I hate how Twitch doesn't let me automatically set to unpinned at the end of the stream. I have to do it each time. Okay. So here we go. Yeah, we're clearing out like this whole area here. Hey, looks like we have a tip rolling in. Let's see who it is from. It's from Elodie, tipping 12, who says, time to expand the cam. That does indeed get to our first face camera expansion milestone at $20 between the 8 from our first tip and this 12 now. So please direct your attention down here to slot 9 where I'm putting the hot in the hot bar. So I can say howdy, y'all. Crow Hills here, expanding as I always do in Nashville, Tennessee. Dee-da-dee-da-dee, dee-da-dee-da-dee, okay. Sus says, I thought that was a fly on my screen for a second. Nope, not quite. It's just me, Joe Hills. Yay! So, I think the next question is, are we ready to move on to chapter 11? We have been reading or we've been hanging out for an hour, so it is time to move on to our second chapter. Everybody's had a chance to discuss. Once again, if you are enjoying the show, tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. And I might, I'll go ahead and read any tips when I come to a logical break in the story. Not necessarily right away. Please don't feel left out or unappreciated if I wait a little bit to read your tip. But yeah, we don't do the intrusive alerts on this channel. We kind of follow the natural flow of the stream. Okay, so... should I empty my inventory before we do that? Before we start? Yeah, probably. Okay. So we're gonna run over here, empty our inventory, and then we'll start chapter 11. Okay, inventory emptying time. Bum, bum, bum. Whoops. And we didn't quite make it up to the second tier. There we go. Tossing the surplus stuff here. And then we got a tip rolling in from Mr. Hardluck, who says, Chapter 11, oh no! Tip more people, and Mr. Hardluck tips another 20. That gets us evenly to our next phase camera expansion milestone. Please direct your attention down to my face, because we're about to expand, Joe. Do-do-do-do. Let's also go ahead and take down the setting up now sign. That's not the setting up now sign. Take down the setting up now sign. Woo! Okay. Okay. You know, we should probably... Let's open up new drink before we go. So, this next chapter is going to be from the point of view of the monster. Frankenstein's monster. Although he doesn't want a credit for it. Good old Vicky F. He's so humble. Okay. So here we go. Chapter 11 of Frankenstein, The Modern Prometheus, by Mary Shelley.
It is with considerable difficulty that I remember the original era of my being. All the events of that period appear confused and indistinct. A strange multiplicity of sensations seized me, and I saw, felt, heard, and smelt at the same time, and it was indeed a long time before I learned to distinguish between the operations of my various senses. By degrees, I remember a stronger light pressed against my nerves, so that I was obliged to shut my eyes. Darkness then came over me and troubled me, but hardly had I felt this when, by opening my eyes, as I now suppose, the light poured in upon me again. I walked, and I believe descended, but I presently found a great alteration in my sensations. Before, dark and opaque bodies had surrounded me. Impervious to my touch or sight, but I now found that I could wander on at liberty, with no obstacles which I could not either surmount or avoid. The light became more and more oppressive to me, and the heat wearying me as I walked, I sought a place where I could receive shade. This was the forest near Ingolstadt, and here I lay by the side of a brook, resting from my fatigue, until I felt tormented by hunger and thirst. This roused me from my nearly dormant state, and I ate some berries which I found hanging on the trees or lying on the ground. I slaked my thirst at the brook, and then, lying down, was overcome by sleep. It was dark when I awoke. I felt cold also, and half frightened, as it were, instinctively finding myself so desolate. Before I had quitted your apartment, on a sensation of cold, I had covered myself with some clothes, but these were insufficient to secure me from the dews of night. I was but a poor, helpless, miserable wretch. I knew and could distinguish nothing, but feeling pain invade me on all sides, I sat down and wept. Soon, a gentle light stole over the heavens and gave me a sensation of pleasure. I started up and beheld a radiant form rise among the trees. The moon. I gazed with a kind of wonder. It moved slowly, but it enlightened my path, and I again went out in search of berries. I was still cold when under one of the trees I found a huge cloak with which I covered myself and sat down upon the ground. No distinct ideas occupied my mind. All was confused. I felt light and hunger and thirst and darkness. Innumerable sounds rang in my ears. And on all sides, various scents saluted me. The only object that I could distinguish was the bright moon, and I fixed my eyes on that with pleasure. Several changes of day and night passed, when I began to distinguish my sensations from each other. I gradually saw plainly the clear stream that supplied me with drink, and the trees that shaded me with their foliage. I was delighted when I first discovered that a pleasant sound, which often saluted my ears, proceeded from the throats of the little winged animals, who had often intercepted the light from my eyes. I began to observe with greater accuracy the forms that surrounded me, and to perceive the boundaries of the radiant roof of light which canopied me. Sometimes I tried to imitate the pleasant songs of the birds, but was unable. Sometimes I wished to express my sensations in my own mode, but the uncouth and inarticulate sounds which broke from me frightened me into silence again. The moon had disappeared from the night, and again, with a lessened form, showed itself, while I still remained in the forest. My sensations had, by this time, become distinct, and my mind received every day additional ideas. My eyes became accustomed to the light and to perceive objects in their right forms. I distinguished the insect from the herb, and by degrees one herb from another. I found that the sparrow uttered none but harsh notes, whilst those of the blackbird and thrush were sweet and enticing. One day, when I was oppressed by cold, I found a fire which had been left by some wandering beggars, and was overcome with delight at the warmth I experienced from it. In my joy, I thrust my hand into the live embers, but quickly drew it out again with a cry of pain. How strange, I thought, that the same cause should produce such opposite effects. I examined the materials of the fire, and, to my joy, found it to be composed of wood. I quickly collected some branches, but they were wet and would not burn. I pained at this and sat still, watching the operation of the fire. The wet wood, which I had placed near the heat, dried and itself became inflamed. I reflected on this, and by touching the various branches, I discovered the cause and had busied myself in collecting a great quantity of wood, that I might dry it and have a plentiful supply of fire. When night came on and brought sleep with it, I was in the greatest fear lest my fire should be extinguished. I covered it carefully with dry wood and leaves, and placed wet branches upon it, and then, spreading my cloak, I lay on the ground and sank into sleep. It was morning when I awoke, and my first care was to visit the fire. I uncovered it, and a gentle breeze quickly fanned it into a flame. I observed this and contrived a fan of branches, which roused the embers when they were nearly extinguished. When night came again, I found, with pleasure, that fire gave light as well as heat, and the discovery of this element was useful to me in my food, for I found some of the offals that the travelers had left had been roasted and tasted much more savory than the berries I gathered from the trees. I tried, therefore, to dress my food in the same manner, placing it in the live embers. I found that the berries were spoiled in this operation, but the nuts and roots were much improved. Food, however, became scarce. I often spent the whole day searching in vain for a few acorns to assuage the pangs of hunger. When I found this, I resolved to quit the place that I had hitherto inhabited, and to seek for one where the few wants I experienced would be more easily satisfied. In this emigration, I exceedingly lamented the loss of the fire which I had obtained through accident, and knew not how to reproduce. I gave several hours to the consideration of this difficulty, but I was obliged to relinquish all attempt to supply it, and, wrapping myself up in the cloak, I struck across the wood toward the setting sun. I passed 3 days in these rambles, and at length discovered the open country. A great fall of snow had taken place the night before, and the fields were of one uniform white. The appearance was disconsolate, and I found my feet chilled by the cold, damp substance that covered the ground. It was about 7 in the morning, and I longed to obtain food and shelter. At length, I perceived a small hut on a rising ground, which had doubtless been built for the convenience of some shepherd. This was a new sight to me, and I examined the structure with great curiosity. Finding the door open, I entered. An old man sat in it near a fire, o'er which he was preparing his breakfast. He turned on hearing a noise, and, perceiving me, shrieked loudly, and, quitting the hut, ran across the fields with a speed of which his debilitated form hardly appeared capable. His appearance different from any I had seen before, and his flight somewhat surprised me. But I was enchanted by the appearance of the hut. Here, the snow and the rain could not penetrate. The ground was dry, and it presented to me then as exquisite and divine a retreat as pandemonium appeared to the demons of hell after their sufferings in the lake of fire. I greedily devoured the remnants of the shepherd's breakfast, which consisted of bread, cheese, milk, and wine. The latter, however, I did not like. Then, overcome by fatigue, I lay down among some straw and fell asleep. It was noon when I awoke, allured by the warmth of the sun, which shone brightly on the white ground. I determined to recommence my travels, and, depositing the remnants of the peasant's breakfast in a wallet I found, I proceeded across the fields. For several hours, until, at sunset, I arrived at a village. How miraculous did this appear? The huts, the neater cottages, and stately houses engaged my admiration by turns. The vegetables in the gardens, the milk and cheese that I saw placed in the windows of some cottages, allured my appetite. One of the best of these I entered. But I had hardly placed my foot within the door when the children shrieked, and one of the women fainted. The whole village was roused. Some fled, some attacked me, until, grievously bruised by stones and many other kinds of missile weapons, I escaped to the open country and fearfully took refuge in a low hovel, quite bare, and making a wretched appearance after the palaces I had beheld in the village. This hovel, however, joined a cottage of a neat and pleasant appearance, but after my late, dearly bought experience, I dared not to enter it. My place of refuge was constructed of wood, but so low I could, with difficulty, sit upright in it. No wood, however, was placed on the earth which formed the floor, but it was dry. And although the rain entered it with innumerable chinks, I found it an agreeable asylum from the snow and rain.
So we're going to take a break there. We're about halfway through this chapter here. This is a little bit of a longer one. So what do y'all think so far about Frankenstein's tale? Somebody said, or Elodie said he's speedrunning the beginning of human civilization. Skulking Ghast agreed. And then, yeah, the reference to the pandemonium, Elodie added, I guess the monster read the Bible at some point, and Best Bear says, and perhaps Milton. Prism Deviant said, I read the scene of the monster being first brought to light in late middle school. I think we were studying Gothic literature. Well, this would indeed fit the bill for that. Camel Cam says the monster is extremely well read for some reason. I am sure that the part of the reason is that Mary Shelley was very well read and wants to kind of share some of that joy. But yeah, I was reading a book recently that had a bunch of stuff about trains in it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And the more and more I was reading the book, the more I was like, I think the author saw the movie Control and just really wanted to go on a deep dive into researching trains and different types of subways and train stations from all over the world. And then was just like, okay, well now I gotta write a book about this because this is my job. And he's constantly doing stuff where, like, people are calling parts of trains the wrong thing and somebody else is correcting them. And it's just like... Book name. I'm working my way through a series, and I'm gonna write something up about the series when I'm caught up. But yeah. I'm not yet ready to go into that, but I think I'm on the second to last book of the series, and I'm binging it pretty hard. So hopefully I'll have that blog post written up by next week, or sometime next week. Welcome, Bradley Ritchie. Dun, 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 dun. Sounds like Moby Dick, except with instead of about whale facts, train facts. Yeah, kind of. It's not quite as meandering as Moby Dick, but it definitely is one of those things like the guy hit book 4 in the series and is just like, okay, this is the one I'm putting all the train stuff in. Do I have a green hat or a blue hat? Well, if I look down, I have a green hat. If I look up, I have a blue hat. So I think it's all about perspective. Yazzie Wolf says, I'm currently obsessed with learning the history of fiber arts. That's cool. YouTube chat's very quiet. Anybody in YouTube chat have any thoughts on the chapter so far? He discovered fire but could not replicate it. He was smart enough to figure out to leave or to travel further when his foraging grounds became exhausted. That's interesting to me. Well, I think trains are cool too. I'm not like trying to diss the guy. I really liked the book, but I was just like, the further I got into the book, the more I was like, I think this guy really just wanted to. This guy was just really excited about trains. There were a lot of ways he could have gone with this book. It was very open-ended what he could do with the fourth, or maybe it was the third book in the series. He had options for where he was going to take the story. And he's like, nope, we're going to trains. Oops, all trains. Yeah, the reason I wanted to take this break is because we need to move all these shulkers, and that's not a good task for doing while I'm reading. We need to move these shulkers, empty them, and then continue the dig. Okay. Is that all 10? Yeah, that's all 10 shulkers there. Okay. So this is my terrible terraforming room. Oh no, did I leave all the extra chests in the other one? I might have, but I can make more. That's not a lot of chests. Granite can go in here for right now. Yeah, we're maxed out on the dirt one for the time being, so we might need to go lower on that too. Which we don't have the wood to do we? Oh, wait, no, there's a box of chests. Come on. Just link up with the other one. There it is. Okay. Glop. Rooted dirt we're going to put in that one. Okay. Stone can go in there. Okay, so we ditch the extra grass. So we're going to start laying these in here, and then we'll come back to... That one's already partially emptied. Dang it. Okay, and then we're going to drop these off here. Okay, that's a full stack. Okay, so 1, 2... 3... Okay, so then we just need a little bit more dirt. Yeah, we're gonna have to put some more dirt boxes, I think, over here. Mer. Okay, so now we're gonna drop that back into there. We're gonna start just filling these ones here with dirt. This one's got 16 more stacks of dirt in it. Okay. So now each of these should be empty. We can go reset that entire area. Okay. Alrighty, bye, sus. Yeah, we're going to get back to reading shortly. We're just in the process of emptying those shulkers so I can grab stuff easier. Just as a reminder, tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. Let's grab from right here. Okay. Yeah. I think we want to clear part of this out here. Of course, I don't have a ender chest on that one anymore, do I? Let's grab this ender chest. Okay. Now if we grab from the beacons box here a little bit of iron, we can now reprogram that to be a haste box. I'm guessing this one's not programmed either, because that probably should have been in range. Oh yeah, this one's the resistance too. Okay. So let's change that one to be the healing one. Jump boost and healing, or speed and healing. Yeah, jump boost and healing. Yeah, we're just going to get this to naturally kind of curve in a little bit more. It's not going to be perfect. We're not clearing out the whole thing, because that building there is now part of the Exile storyline and important, but we can round this out so it's not quite as lumpy and unnatural. Why is that guy trying to get up there? I don't understand. What's in it for you, bud? What are you trying to get up here? Oh. Well, that's good to know. Those guys are going to die if they come out. Oh, come on. Okay. Trying to just clean this up some. Round it out. Okay. So this feels a lot better than it did. But to actually figure out if we're accomplishing our objectives, the objective is to kind of clean up the line of sight between the water tower and the main building. And we've done that to some degree by cleaning that up. We've gotten rid of the igloo. This over here, though, is still kind of just a mess. I don't even know what's going on with this. Oh my gosh. Just a pile of dirt. Why? Why is there just a pile of dirt there? Nobody knows. Who could know? Okay, we're getting closer to this side now, so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to move the shulkers over to that side. And then once we get all the shulkers placed, we can start our reading. Or resume our reading. Pickaxe does indeed go burr. Okay, we got too many things that aren't getting picked up at this point, so we gotta drop these shulker boxes off. Okay, so we're gonna put that one back. Then these ones go down here. And then we go and we replenish everything. Okay. Welcome, Quackins. Glad you could join us. We are just about to resume reading from the middle of Chapter 11 of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. We were taking a quick inventory management break because it's harder for me to read while I'm doing a lot of inventory management than when I'm in process on the terraforming. So yeah, let's just clear this out enough that we can take one more look at it in the distance after emptying my pockets, and then we'll resume reading. Yeah, we've definitely come further out this way, which I think is a good thing, but not honestly certain yet. Oh, the other thing we need to do is we need to turn these into doom boxes here. Doom boxes are anything that isn't going into the terraforming supply sort. And then, oh, I realize now that my other tools we had left back over here. We need to swap out the shovel. Okay, all three of these can go back in there as well, so we have them accessible from anywhere. Okay, so we're going to look back out this way from the entrance of the building toward the water tower. And we're going to see if anything really messes with our line of sight in a way that we need to deal with and address. Okay. Honestly, no, this is going pretty well, really. So we'll take care of that beacon there after we clear out some of that other stuff. That whole hillside area there, we're going to kind of leave, kind of framing things the same way that that other one is. Hey, bunny rabbit. But yeah, like when I'm up here and I'm looking out there now, you got both ponds, and then you can see out to there. Yeah. So we're just going to keep kind of shaving this bit down there a little bit, but we don't even have to do too much with that. Basically, at this point, we've knocked out almost everything. Whatever we get done beyond this point is a nice to have, but not a must have. So we'll go enjoy having nice things. But yeah, this is all getting carved out along here. Okay, so we are now going to continue Chapter 11 of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Here then I retreated and lay down, happy to have found a
Here then I retreated and lay down, happy to have found a shelter, however miserable, from the inclemency of the season, and still more from the barbarity of man. As soon as morning dawned, I crept from my kennel, that I might view the adjacent cottage, and discover if I could remain in the habitation I had found. It was situated against the back of the cottage, and surrounded on the sides, which were exposed by a pigsty and a clear pool of water. One part was open, and by that part I had crept in, but now I covered every crevice by which I might be perceived with stones and wood, yet in such a manner that I might move them on occasion to pass out. All the light I enjoyed came through the sty, and that was sufficient for me. Having thus arranged my dwelling and carpeting it with clean straw, I retired, for I saw the figure of the man at the distance, and I remembered too well the treatment the night before to trust myself at his power. I had first, however, provided for my sustenance for that day by a loaf of coarse bread, which I purloined, and a cup with which I could drink more conveniently than from my hand of the pure water which flowed by my retreat. The floor was a little raised, so that it was kept perfectly dry, and by its vicinity to the chimney of the cottage, it was tolerably warm. Being thus provided, I resolved to reside in this hovel until something should occur which might alter my determination. It was indeed a paradise compared to the bleak forest, my former residence. The rain-dropping branches and dank earth. I ate my breakfast with pleasure and was about to remove a plank to procure myself a little water, when I heard a step, and, looking through a small chink, I beheld a young creature with a pail on her head passing before my hovel. The girl was young and of gentle demeanor, unlike what I've since found cottagers and farmhouse servants to be. Yet she was meanly dressed, a coarse blue petticoat and a linen jacket being her only garb. Her fair hair was plaited but not adorned. She looked patient yet sad. I lost sight of her, and in about a quarter of an hour she returned bearing the pail, which was now partly filled with milk. As she walked along, seemingly incommodated by the burden, a young man met her, whose countenance expressed a deeper despondence. Uttering a few sounds With an air of melancholy, he took the pail from her and bore it to the cottage himself. She followed, and they disappeared. Presently, I saw the young man again, with some tools in his hands, cross the field behind the cottage, and the girl was also busied, sometimes in the house, and sometimes in the yard. On examining my dwelling, I found that one of the windows of the cottage had formerly occupied a part of it, but the panes had been filled up with wood. In one of these was a small and almost imperceptible chink through which the eye could just penetrate. Through this crevice, a small room was visible. Whitewashed and clean, but very bare of furniture. In one corner, near a small fire, sat an old man, leaning his head on his hands in a disconsolate attitude. The young girl was occupied in arranging the cottage, but presently she took something out of a drawer which employed her hands, and she sat down beside the old man, who, taking up an instrument, began to play and to produce sounds sweeter than the voice of the thrush or the nightingale. It was a lovely sight, even to me, poor wretch who had never beheld aught beautiful before. The silver hair and benevolent countenance of the aged cottager won my reverence, while the gentle manners of the girl enticed my love. He played a sweet, mournful air, which I perceived drew tears from the eyes of his amiable companion, of which the old man took no notice until she sobbed audibly. Then he pronounced a few sounds, and the fair creature, leaving her work, knelt at his feet. He raised her and smiled with such kindness and affection that I felt sensations of a peculiar and overpowering nature. They were a mixture of pain and pleasure, such as I had never before experienced, either from hunger or cold, warmth or food, and I withdrew from the window, unable to bear these emotions. Soon after, this young man returned, bearing on his shoulders a load of wood. The girl met him at the door, helped to relieve him of his burden, and, taking some of the fuel into the cottage, placed it on the fire. Then she and the youth went apart to a nook of the cottage, and he showed her a large loaf and a piece of cheese. She seemed pleased and went into the garden and appeared busily employed in digging and pulling up roots. After he had been, for some roots and plants, which she placed in some water, and then upon the fire. She afterwards continued her work, while a young man went into the garden and appeared busily employed in digging and pulling up roots. After he had been employed thus for about an hour, the young woman joined him, and they entered the cottage together. The old man had, in the meantime, been pensive, but, on the appearance of his companions, assumed a more cheerful air. And they sat down to eat. The meal was quickly dispatched. The young woman was again occupied in arranging the cottage. The old man walked before the cottage in the sun for a few minutes, leaning on the arm of the youth. Nothing could exceed in beauty the contrast between these two excellent creatures. One was old, with silver hair, and a countenance beaming with benevolence and love. The younger was slight and graceful in his figure, and his features were molded with the finest symmetry. Yet his eyes and attitude expressed the utmost sadness and despondency. The old man returned to the cottage, and the youth, with tools different from those he had used in the morning, directed his steps across the fields. Night quickly shut in, but, to my extreme wonder, I found that the cottages had a means of prolonging the light by use of tapers, and I was delighted to find that the setting of the sun did not put an end to the pleasure I experienced in watching my human neighbors. In the evening, the young girl and her companion were engaged in various occupations which I did not understand. The old man again took up the instrument which produced the divine sounds that had enchanted me in the morning. So soon as he had finished, the youth began not to play, but to utter sounds that were monotonous and neither resembling the harmony of the old man's instrument nor the songs of the birds. I since found that he read aloud, but at that time I knew nothing of the science of words or letters. The family, after being thus occupied for a short time, extinguished their lights, as I conjectured, to rest.
And that concludes Chapter 11 of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Welcome, Moot Ship Raiders. Moot Ship JTF-102, Feels Chevruli, and Shady Oni10 say we raid with hugs. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are just reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley while I do grindy work in Minecraft. That's a Saturday night tradition here on the Joe Hills on HermitCraft show. We like to read novels or poems or songs or different things like that while I do super grindy stuff that doesn't really need my full attention. We are getting a lot done here on our terraforming project. I guess we can switch over from the what we're building pin to the, or from the what we're reading pin to the what we're building pin. But let's try and sleep first. But yeah, thank you for your patience, Raiders. I don't like to interrupt a chapter to announce raids or tips. Just as a reminder, too, anybody who'd like to tip, we are 20 away from our next Face Gamer expansion milestone. And tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. Bum, 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 bum. La da 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 da. Do 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 do. La da 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 da. Okay, so we are doing a pretty decent job of clearing out the line of sight between the main building and the water tower. We're going to leave the stuff on the sides to frame that kind of sight line. We're not completely terraforming every single bit of this entire area, but we are leveling out what we can, or grading. We're not really completely leveling it. We're grading it. We're having this. We're modifying the slope as it approaches the water tower back there, so that we have a better line of sight. I think one of the things we need to do as well is this particular beacon actually needs to get pulled out. Pulled out. Gonna take that beacon. Dun, da, da. Da 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 dee dee. Once we get enough of this stone, we'll pull that beacon out. Yeah. So did anybody have any thoughts on chapter 11 of Frankenstein? Frankenstein's first exposure to humans. We saw him being chased out of the village. We saw him meet the guy in the shepherd's cottage. And we saw him basically spying on some people hiding in a kennel attached to their home. It's you know, people talk about, like, this is very early science fiction. This really reminds me of, like, Star Trek episodes where they would be, like, watching a pre-warp settlement, which is, you know, obviously always a good idea. That can never go sideways. Prism Deviant says, the monster taking such pleasure in the simplicity of the daily routine that made me feel things. Yep. And here's the other thing to note is that because Mary Shelley's family was pretty well moneyed, this might be something where when she was a kid, maybe she spied on some of the servants' cottages or something. I don't have anything to back that up, but this feels to me like a rich person imagining what it must be like to live in such a simple cottage without all the concerns of the wealthy elites, you know? Mootchip says, I've never actually read Frankenstein or watched a rendition of it. I probably should at some point or another. Yeah, that's one of the things that, one of the reasons I picked this book is this is our third novel we're doing on the show. In previous years, we've read Dracula and Moby Dick, and I try to pick stories that are really in the public consciousness, but that not everybody's actually taken the chance to sit down and read, you know? And so that way, too, people can kind of jump in partway through, because they're like, well, I don't have to worry about getting spoiled, because I've seen, like, Pinky and the Brain and Animaniacs and all these other things make fun of this 1,000 times. Like, I know the core concept, you know? So people can just jump right into it. But also, it's kind of rewarding to be like, oh, yeah, there's a reason this is a classic. Yeah, I'm really digging this, you know? But yeah, what were you up to on your stream, Mootship? Once again, thank you for your patience on the acknowledgement. But yeah, I knew we were drawing to a close on the chapter when you raided, so I really just kind of wanted to power through. Okay. And we need to eat some steak, too. Nom nom nom. La da 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 do 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 do. Kai Farem says romanticism did have a bit of a thing for portraying a romanticized idea of country life. Yeah. What did they do all day? They go out in the fields and then they milk a cow. Seems so nice and simple. Oh, they just get some vegetables from the garden. They don't have to argue with the cook. They don't have people running in and out of their way all day. Oh, it must be nice to live without servants constantly harrying you. Okay. Mootship says, I was playing some Played Up with a friend and finished doing my dailies in Sky. Boy. What would that stand for? In Sky. Colorado Timeline? As someone that used to read a lot, I appreciate you waiting until the end of the chapter. Yeah, I'm glad. Children of the Light. Oh, okay. Gotcha. I'm not familiar with that. Yeah, there's so many new games coming out all the time. Like... Planeshifter says, I'm wondering if the creature has the basic instincts, but none of the memories of whatever brain they were fitted with. Yeah, that sounds about right to me. Because, yeah, the creature is still, you know, basically, you know, it's made from human parts. It's a very cute little game. It says Mootship. Oh, cool. Kai Farem says, yeah, the Wikipedia page on Pastoral links to Cottagecore in the See Also section, and yeah. Cristali says, I find stories of others observing and discovering the familiar fascinating. It still frequently crops up in science fiction. Yep. Okay, so looking at how this is going to appear from out there, that's still a little bit higher than I would like. We have shaved this down a lot. This is a lot better than it was. Okay. So, looking at this, yeah, we're definitely clearing out a good portion of it. Like I said, for those of you just joining us, we are focusing on terraforming the line of sight between the water tower and the main building here. And we're going to leave the stuff that frames that line of sight, like these outlying hills, but anything that's kind of directly in between the two, we're going to try and change the slope on and grade more gradually. Mootship says, I've thought of reading Pride and Prejudice or something of the like on the stream recently, but I've never seen somebody doing it, really. Thanks for the motivation boost. Yeah, so the trick to this is that I realized years ago that there were certain things that were so boring to do in Minecraft that I didn't want to sit and do them by myself. But they weren't really a good fit for a stream either, because it's just like me standing at a skeleton spawner, or me sorting inventory, or me gathering 80 shulkers of sand. And I realized that some of those repetitive tasks I could do while reading. So we started off with like reading short stories and songs and poems and stuff. And then over time, like somebody was like, have you considered reading Dracula? I was like, well, let me try a chapter or two. And so like when we started reading the novel Dracula, the plan was not to read the whole chapter. The plan was just to, we're going to have a hangout and read stream. But then I was like, you know what? I could do this whole thing. Yeah, I guess the only streams I do, like, a full reading where I'm not playing games is the Christmas Carol streams, which we've been doing for years. But so yeah, I guess I did have a once a year reading thing where I would spend 4 days reading a Christmas Carol every December. But yeah, in terms of like reading while playing games, I have to pick certain tasks in Minecraft that are easier to do while I'm reading. And I also have to like try to find breaks in the chapters and stuff to do more complex inventory management, or I get too distracted and lose my place in the, paragraph. But yeah, so find a story that you want to do fun voices for would be part of my advice. Because like I started off doing stuff like the Cask of Amontillado. And, like, doing the Cask of Amontillado with different pairs of voices, like, doing Fortunato and Montresor as Bill and Ted, was a fun exercise for me. Practicing, like, famous speeches. Like, I've done several times the Rice University address by President JFK. More famously known as the "We choose to go to the moon" speech. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. Blah, blah, like that one. So yeah, if you're doing it with fun voices too, that like helps ease the audience into it. Because they want to see you inject your personality and vocal talents into whatever you're reading. Like, there are better books on tape of Frankenstein where the person isn't playing Minecraft and getting distracted. But the voices that I'm bringing to this are voices that I've practiced over the years doing different kind of stuff in game and whatnot. And so it's, familiar to my viewers in that way. I have a friend that does marbles with music. I want to do marbles while I crochet and read. When you say marbles, are you talking about the game where you take glass spheres and you draw a chalk circle and you put the marbles in like a plus shape and then try to hit a bigger marble into it? Or is this some youth term that I don't know? I'm old. I literally played with marbles on the sidewalk with chalk when I was a child. And so, to me, that's what marbles is. But that doesn't make any sense in the context of this conversation for you to suggest that. So I really have no clue what you're talking about. There's a racing game called Marbles on Stream. Oh, I think I've seen that. Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, and it, like, puts, like, the names of the people in your Twitch chat on the certain marbles, I think. Okay, yeah, I remember seeing that something like 10 years ago. I think Pause on Pause was streaming that one day. Although if it was back when Pause was streaming, that might have been 12 years ago. Let's see, because I've been streaming since 2008. But I don't think Pause really started streaming until 2011. So how long ago is that? Oh my gosh, yeah. This was a while ago. I think I must have seen that, or maybe I saw something that it is now like a clone of years and years and years ago. I saw that a very long time ago. But yeah, I remember thinking it was cool. It just wasn't a good fit for what I do. I'm very results focused, even though it doesn't necessarily seem like it. I like to do things where at the end of the stream, it's like, oh, hey, I actually got a lot done, I also like being able to cover rent and health insurance, though. So let's just segue into mentioning the tipping link for the last time. This is the last tipping link post of the stream. We have finished both chapters of the book, and we are going to be wrapping up in about 10 minutes. Last night, I said we'd be wrapping up in 10 minutes, and I wrapped up in 9. And then, just as I ended the stream, a PayPal tip rolled in. PayPal tips sometimes, like, I don't know if they do maintenance on the weekend nights or whatever, but they can just take a little bit longer sometimes on the weekend evenings. And I feel really bad, because, like, I appreciate that person who tipped at the last minute, but I didn't get to thank them on stream. So, yeah, let's go ahead and pull that up now. Yeah, so thank you very much to Marshall, who tipped last minute last night, if you're watching tonight, Marshall. Thank you again. Sorry that I had already given up. But yeah, so we're going to be hanging out for another 10 minutes or so while I wrap up this stream. And I think the last thing I do need to do over here is going to be to clean out that... Oh, boy. I feel kind of like I should just hew into here real quick, though. Like, while we still have that beacon there, I'm not going to want to move that beacon. I'm going to want to remove that beacon, not replace it. Welcome, Skittish Wishes. Yeah, we still got about 10 minutes left in the stream. We are winding down for the evening. Did anybody have any last-minute thoughts about either chapter? I know we did an initial talk about chapter 10, then we talked about 11. But now that we've finished both chapters, does anybody have any thoughts on the monster story so far, or how this is all tied together? Once again, I know some of you guys have read ahead. I have read this entire book too, but last time I read it was like 20 years ago. So we're trying not to talk too much about anything from the future chapters, just the stuff we've gotten to so far. So if you have any other last-minute thoughts on the book, now's a great time to share them. Lizzie Mack, you can share your thought, even if it's not related at this point, because nobody else in the YouTube chat is saying too much. Pepper Basinji, this book is in the public domain. That's part of why I chose it. Oh, you're saying I should recommend to make sure that Moot Ship picks a book in the public domain. Oh, yeah. Make sure you pick a book in the public domain, Moot Ship. I know Pride and Prejudice you mentioned. But yeah, if you want to be allowed to, like, keep your VODs up or have people catch up with this later, don't use anything copyrighted. You might love the novel Jurassic Park, but you start reading Jurassic Park, even if they're not doing it today, just you wait. All these companies selling AI solutions are going to be going back through VODs and looking for people reading copyrighted texts. The same way that at some point a bunch of clips from 10 years ago got pulled down because they had music in them. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, here's a bunch of copyright strikes for music because it suddenly got cheaper to go through the entire archive and look for those. Yeah, don't screw around with reading copyrighted stuff if you want the video to persist. Yeah, I know Jane Austen's works weren't under copyright, which is why I didn't think to say it initially. But yeah, Pepper Basenji pointed out that while we're talking about it, I should mention that. Not just even for you, but for the benefit of anybody else who was inspired by you saying this and wanting to jump in. I love reading on stream. I hope more people do it, and I want to be encouraging. But yeah, I do need to... Yeah, sometimes I forget that other people don't always realize this stuff. Some people do, but not everybody. So yeah. Lizzie Mack says, Joe, you look kind of like Luke Skywalker. I've been rewatching the Star Wars films, and you look like Mark Hamill. Well, I think people generally find Mark Hamill to be a pretty handsome guy, so I'm going to take that as a compliment. That's very kind of you to say, Lizzie Mack. Thank you. And I appreciate you, like, not making it weird, too. Like, you know, I was rewatching Empire Strikes Back and being like, wow, that looks just like Joe. I wish he'd carry me in a little backpack while running through the swamp. Like, yeah, see, that's when it starts getting weird. So thank you for staying on the correct side of the line there. So, it's the Apollo 13 says, so the monster is just talking at Vicky for the whole of the last 2 chapters? Like, is Vicky just standing there? No, remember they went to a hut at the end of At the end of the previous chapter, the monster said, you know, let's get out of the cold. I know a place nearby where I can start a fire. Yeah, no, there's a little hut somewhere in the mountains. Bootship says, I think there are a lot of people that don't really worry about keeping VODs, so they play music and don't seem to have troubles. Some others don't think about it either. The thing is, you don't have troubles until you do. And I'm just one of those people where I've gotten screwed on a lot of things where people are like, ah, nah, this is fine. They never go after anybody, blah, blah, blah. It's like, eh, man. Yeah. So I'm just a little bit more cautious. Just a little bit more cautious because of bad experiences in the past. I'm a very trusting person sometimes, or at least I was when I was younger. And I've learned that just because some people don't get in trouble for something doesn't mean I can assume I won't get in trouble for it. But, you know, the other thing, too, is, like, I spent a ton of time on that Dracula reading. It took me a year to read all of Dracula. And you know what? The VODs of that, I'm pretty proud of how I read it as I went. But, like, they're not book-on-tape quality. If I got to the end of reading a book like that and was like, you know what? I really wish there was a book-on-tape quality version of this that I had done. If I had the time, I could go back and just do Dracula, start to finish, as a book on tape. I don't have the time. And, you know, so we're not doing that. But it's the sort of thing that I would like to do at some point, and I love the fact that the option is open if I somehow did have time. That's an option that remains open to me. But if I sat here and I had read Jurassic Park, and then I was like, oh man, I want to do... Let's do this for real. Let's do a serious book on tape of Jurassic Park, because I loved reading it aloud so much. I'd just be like, oh no, they'll definitely go after me for that. But, like, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's the sort of thing where, like, okay, with the Dracula thing, if I decided to go back and do, like, a Kickstarter or something to make the time to record it, that option would still be open to me. I don't think that's wise right now, because I have a lot of other obligations. But as my kid gets older and is more, you know, autonomous and responsible, and, you know, once my spouse gets a green card and can work, because right now, like, when you're pending a green card in the U.S. on, like, a fiancé visa, you cannot work. So right now, like, I'm responsible for a lot of things that in a year or two might slacken off, you know. Just keeping those options open is super important. Anchor says off-season project. It depends on what other off-season projects I have. Skittish Wishes says genuine Joe Hill's audiobooks might be the coolest thing. I would love to work my way to the point where I could produce those well. I would love to do that, and that's part of what we're practicing here every week. Is every week that I'm practicing reading out loud, I'm trying different voices, I'm doing stuff, getting better, learning things. We're working toward that. I'm not going to rush it because, once again, I don't have the time. I've got too many other responsibilities. If we tried to do it right now, I'd fail and then never try again. But right now, what I'm doing is building toward a successful run at that in a year or two. Pepper Basenji says, during COVID, I worked for a library doing Sunday night children's stories, and we had no copyright issues because authors gave us permission to use it. So I guess you were streaming these or whatever. But after a year, everyone was asked to take the videos down again. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the thing, is, like, even if you get permission in the short term, if you don't have, like, a contract... Yeah, you don't know what's going to happen. It's just safer to stick with public domain stuff, and there's so much great stuff out there that so many people want to read but just haven't made the time for. It's been really rewarding for me. I've really enjoyed doing this. Okay. So let's go back here and clear out some more of that. Okay, this is really coming together. Okay, so let's go ahead and empty some of this stuff. Get all this kind of sorted out here. The tools situation is not looking great. And then I don't remember actually what time I posted the tipping link at, but I said we were going to wait at least 10 minutes before we wrapped up. So let me check the timestamp on that. Timestamp. So 10:46 is 10:58. Okay, so it's been 12 minutes. Going to do a hard refresh in PayPal just to make sure that we didn't miss anybody. I feel really apologetic again. Thank you to Marshall for tipping last minute last night. Sorry I didn't get you in time. Okay, looks like we are all good on thanking people, though, for this evening. Welcome, Blossom. Glad you could join us. We're about to wrap up, though. Okay. So, let's see what is going on. Following live. Wow, it is mixing random suggestions in. I hate that Twitch is always changing the stupid stuff. Okay. It looks like my pal and project manager, NJ Coffee Junkie, who I forgot to mute before I opened the thing, is playing Hades, which I believe is a Greek word for the underworld. I don't really know much about the game, but presumably it's slightly lower in elevation than the rest of the world. I hope when you get over there, you have a fun time, and you greet NJ by saying, howdy, y'all. Joe Hill's raid here. Thank y'all so much for hanging out tonight. Thank you, Linksy, for the raid. Thank you, Mootship, for the raid. We had a few other raiders as well. I appreciate you all. When you get over there, once again, howdy, y'all. Joe Hill's raid here. Until next time, y'all, this is Joe Hills from Nashville, Tennessee. Keep adventuring.